Kenny Asker, stories from Reddit.
A few years ago, my boyfriend of nearly 5 years left me for some woman he met at work. I'd suspected he was cheating on me for a while but never had any proof until I came home one day to find all his belongings gone. The only thing he left behind was a note that read, "I'm so sorry for everything I've put you through. I'm not leaving because I don't love you. I'm leaving because it's just not working anymore. You deserve to be happy. I'm sorry I couldn't give that to you." Needless to say, I was devastated. But that heartbreak quickly turned into rage when I logged onto Facebook 2 days later and saw he was already in a relationship with some random woman I'd never even heard of. As much as I wanted to reach out, I resisted. Days turned into weeks, and eventually, he contacted me first. He left a voicemail, slurring and crying about how leaving me was the biggest mistake of his life and how he wished he could take it all back. I wasn't interested in hearing any of it. I'd heard his drunken apologies too many times before, but I let him ramble on, and in the midst of his groveling, an idea came to me. We continued texting and talking secretly over the next week until he finally asked to see me. I agreed. He showed up at my house around PM, driving her brand new car. He was completely trashed, reeking of booze and who knows what else. My disgust was real, but I played nice. He made a few sloppy attempts to sleep with me, but I shut him down each time. I did, however, drink with him, part of the plan. Eventually, he passed out cold in my bed. I shook him, slapped his face lightly, even tickled the bottoms of his feet, since he's ridiculously ticklish. Nothing worked. He was out cold. So I moved on to phase 2. Very carefully, I planted a massive hickey on his neck, a real showstopper. Then I snapped a picture of us lying side by side. Next, I grabbed a piece of paper, put on some bright red lipstick, and wrote, "Sweet ride. Hope you don't mind, but we broke the back seat in for YA. P.S. You're welcome." I sealed the note with a kiss mark and slipped it into the glove compartment of her car. Then, I went back inside and drafted a text with the photo attached to his new girlfriend. The caption read, "Check your glove compartment." Satisfied, I went to sleep on the couch. The next morning, he woke up groggy and confused. When he realized where he was, he freaked out, panicking over what he'd tell his girlfriend and begging me to keep quiet. I smiled sweetly and promised my lips were sealed. As soon as he stumbled out the door, without even glancing in a mirror, I hit send on the message. You guessed it, she dumped his ass. He came crawling back once again. Only this time, I didn't answer. The calls stopped soon enough, and I have since moved on to better and much bigger things. So, as my girl Carrie Underwood would say, maybe next time he'll think before he cheats. LDR, my boyfriend of nearly 5 years left me for a coworker, confirming my suspicions of cheating. Weeks later, he drunkenly reached out, claiming he regretted leaving me. I invited him over, got him wasted, and he passed out. I left a huge hickey on his neck, took a photo of us together, and planted a lipstick-marked note in his new girlfriend's car implying we'd hooked up. The next morning, I sent her the photo with a message to check the glove compartment. She dumped him, and he tried, once again, to win me over. But I wiped my hands clean of the cheating as fool. I woke up early that Saturday to get to my appointment with my mechanic by M. I had been using him at that point for about 6 years or so. I was so happy to finally have a mechanic in my life that I could trust. He was my former student's older brother, and his shop was a hop and a skip from my house. Khan was from Afghanistan, an immigrant. He had come to this country in his childhood and settled in Queens, NY. And here he was, 15 years since his arrival, with his own garage. A real American dream success story. On this particular day, Khan was not around, but his brother Abdul was. Abdul was another just exceptional human being and a great mechanic. He was a little older than Khan and a lot less talkative. Khan's shop was a throwback, the kind of shop that you walked in the front garage doors and leaned on your car, smoking a cigarette and talking while the mechanic fixed your car and talked. Today, Abdul was a little more talkative than usual. We got on the subject of Afghanistan, and I asked him if he was old enough to remember the Russian occupation in the 1980s. Sure I was, he said, and he told me a story. He said his uncles fought in that war and that he actually lived not too far from the Russian border, where the Russian soldiers would be stationed in the backs of their vehicles on the sides of the roads, awaiting their orders. What my mechanic told me was that his uncles would give him baskets of cookies laced with heroin to offer the Russian soldiers. and he as a child, 7 years old or so, would walk out onto the dirt roads and offer the soldiers a treat, and then he'd get the hell out of there. He said it was a common guerrilla tactic. After my car was fixed, Abdul doing a great job as usual and charging a reasonable fee, I dapped him up and headed over to my barber for a haircut. It was around noon. Upon walking into the shop, I noticed my guy was not there, and it was pretty busy, but there was an open chair. David, a tall Russian immigrant in his late 40s. He reminded me of Kramer from Seinfeld, except his accent was thick and heavy. I sat in his chair. A quick calculation of approximate age in my head, and a little subtraction, and I deduced that David must have been in his late teens, early 20s, in the mid to late 1980s. It didn't take long for me to ask, "Hey David, did you serve in the army when you lived in Russia?" And he couldn't have said it fast enough. Yes, they sent me to the Afghanistan border. I told him about my conversation with my mechanic that morning and what he had told me about the heroin and the cookies. David snickered and threw his eyes into memory, remembering. He almost seemed nostalgic. And there it is, my mechanic fought my barber in a war. I got my car fixed and my hair cut in the same day by two human beings that 30 years prior were trying to kill each other. One day, I had woken up in a room, not remembering how I got there. It had metal bars similar to a prison cell. The three walls were painted with a calming shade of green, but I was anything but calm. I was screaming. I thought I had gotten over my trauma until a few days ago, I had a dream that brought me back to that place. I was lying strapped down in that green room as the doctor attached electrical nodes to my temples and administered electroconvulsive therapy. She had shoved white gauze in my mouth so I wouldn't bite my own tongue. That white gauze would soon turn red. There is a sudden pain as my eyesight goes dark. My body convulses and I remain unconscious for several minutes afterwards. I had forgotten what it felt like until I had that dream again. And now I cannot stop thinking about it. To be honest, I can't remember exactly how many times I had electroconvulsive therapy done to me. That's the thing about it, it makes you forget. I befriended a girl at that mental hospital. We spoke for 2 weeks about trivial things like K-pop music and Korean dramas. There was nothing else to do but sit around and talk. There was nothing wrong with her mental state. Rather, she was a practitioner of Falun Gong and her family did not approve, so they had her locked up in a mental institution. When her father came to visit, the doctor threatened her that if she begged to go home, she would be given electroconvulsive therapy. And my friend did beg to go home, who wouldn't? And so the doctor had people tie her down as she cried. And she was zapped in the head with electricity in the same manner I was. I visited her after she regained consciousness. Her face was streaked with tears and she appeared dazed. She didn't remember who I was or what my name was, and we had been talking for 2 weeks for hours every day. We had made plans that after we both left, she would come visit my house. But after she left, she never did call. Wherever she is now, I hope she is okay. The other friend I made there is not doing so well. She's in prison now. Her life story is unfortunate. She dropped out of school when she was young and started working, and she became very successful. But then she married an abusive man who savagely beats her. Later on, her business ventures failed, and she owed people a lot of money. Her husband divorced her and married another woman, and her kids are with him while she remains institutionalized. She hasn't seen her kids in a year. It's too far for them to visit. Not that her ex-husband would take them to visit her anyway. I don't know the specifics, but I genuinely believe that she is a good person. She took care of me for months when I was literally insane. I cursed and yelled at her, but she still fed me and bathed me when I didn't know anything. The nurses and orderlies didn't bother to do any of that. They left the responsibility of caring for patients to other patients. There were 2 women there who attempted to kill their own children after their husbands had cheated on them. One jumped down a well with her baby in an attempted suicide, and the other gave poison to their kids to ingest. My father said that if their children had died, they would regret it for the rest of their lives. That hospital was rather corrupt. If you bribed the nurses, they would bring you whatever food you wanted from outside, but you had to pay 3 to 4 times the usual price. We ate at 9 a.m. and 3 p.m. every day. If you didn't buy extra food, you only got 2 meals a day, and the meals there were rather plain. It was usually rice with 2 boiled eggs or 2 small pieces of meat and precisely 2 pieces. No one gets anything extra unless there were leftovers. From 3 p.m. until bedtime at 9 p.m., There were no more meals unless you spent money to buy extra snacks. Many people have spent years in this hospital with no visitors, and they had no money to buy anything, not even toilet paper. Yes, you had to buy your own. After eating, you had to wash the dishes yourself. There was no cleaning staff. Every Sunday, the patients had to scrub the bathroom themselves. As for the bathroom, it was one big communal shower with squat toilets placed side by side. There is no privacy. Everyone saw each other naked, but you quickly learned not to care. You had to hand wash your own clothes and hang it out to air dry. During the rainy seasons, the clothing rack had to be moved indoors and they didn't dry so well. Southeast Asia is a hot place. There was no air conditioning in this hospital. The place I was in was one big courtyard with 3 buildings on the sides. I slept in a large room with over a dozen other people. There weren't even proper beds. It was a metal slab with metal panels, and you placed a straw mat over it. My friend had gotten me a large cushion so I didn't have to lay on the hard surface. The staff there would tie you to a metal bed if you misbehaved, got into fights, or tried to commit suicide. And they just left you lying there for a whole day. A few people got tied up for nearly a week. The nurses would let you out once a day to go take a shit. If you needed to urinate, you're left to piss on yourself. They would even leave a tub or bucket underneath the metal bed to collect urine. After someone is released, they would hose down the metal bed with water, but it was still unsanitary and downright inhumane. Believe it or not, my dad said this was the biggest and nicest mental hospital in the South. I once asked a girl there if she ever contemplated suicide, and she told me even an ant wants to live, so why wouldn't I? I no longer remember her face or name, but her words would forever remain in the back of my mind, urging me to keep on living when I feel like giving up on life. The saddest thing I can admit is that my happiest birthday party was at that hospital. Although my dad had to bribe the doctor with a lot of money to get me a birthday cake. It was the happiest I've been in a long time, because there I had a lot of friends. I make a lot of friends whenever I go to the mental hospital, and I've been institutionalized 7 times in my life. However, those friendships did not last because life naturally draws us apart. But that's the only thing I really want in this life. Good friends that will stick by you through hardship. After leaving that place, I experienced slight PTSD whenever I had to lay down on a surface with someone standing near my head. I was getting a facial one day, and the experience was agonizing. Looking up into a bright light with a woman touching my face, my toes and hands were clenched as I would brace for the incoming electric shock. Then pain and darkness. I don't actually remember much of my personal experience, but I would forever remember how it happened to other people, how their body would repeatedly convulse from the electroconvulsive therapy. It was downright scary to see. Occasionally, I would reflect on my experiences, and I feel that all our sufferings build character and substance, not to say that suffering is a good thing. But when I was younger, I was haughty. I felt infallible. Now, after all of my failures, I have been humbled. I now understand what compassion is, and seeing my dad visit me at the hospital every week, I finally understood what love was. As I've stated, I've been institutionalized 7 times in my life, both in the United States and in Asia. And let me tell you that mental hospitals in the US are heaven compared to the ones in developing countries. There was a confirmation ceremony in my town's church, and me and a couple of friends that are same my age attended. We had a few rehearsals before the actual event, but when the time came, I was nervous as hell, especially because there was at least 500 people present. There is a part in the ceremony where our bishop reads us our oaths, first part being you refuse, and the second part being you accept. The priest that was my vicar told me that I should shout out my answers because my voice is strong and it resonates the church. So long story short, our bishop, who was recently promoted to cardinal, came out, raised his hand, and told us our oaths. I did really good at the first part, refusing every sin there is, but then he suddenly switched to I accept God as my Lord and etc. And in that moment I shouted, I refuse God. Suddenly, the whole church went silent as a funeral. I can't tell you the sheer will to just jump into the pretty stained glass and bleed out. But luckily the cardinal was very chill and made a joke in the middle of the ceremony that I may have come to the wrong place. Everybody laughed. I was made fun of for months. So yeah, that's my confirmation there. Over the years, I became an atheist. I wonder if it's because of this.